Newsflash, UCLA just made a huge investment to their future a lot sooner than what I thought they would make in their athletics programs at this very moment by extending their AD.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever it's your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And where we're getting started here is some big-time news released on November the 14th, same day we dropped this pod, a little bit later, though. Is, all right, we're heading into what could be a big game week for UCLA football. We're heading into the easy portion of the UCLA basketball schedule for the men's side. The women, they're building up to their South Carolina game, getting to that cooler part of the autumn season here in Los Angeles. But no, the biggest news coming out of Westwood was that they extended the AD, Martin Jarmond, right? The former athletic director at Boston College, the one-time youngest AD in all of Power 5 sports. And now here he is going to be leading UCLA for a few more years. The Bruins extended him through 2029, officially announced by the program. This is what the UCLA newsroom press release had to say. He was named athletic director in 2020, 6-year contract. It's been extended 2029. Under his leadership, he has been touted to have won 18 conference titles, 5 NCAA titles, was a huge influence in the move from the Pac-12, which is now crumbled and been restructured into UCLA's current conference affiliation, the Big Ten. All that within about 2 years of him being the AD at UCLA, and now he's still more than halfway through what was his first initial deal. Had the big partnership with Nike and the Jordan brand after UCLA saw the big deals falling through and the aftermath of the deficit they face with the budget, which they still do. And one of the big things they're touting about his tutelage is that all the Bruin teams had a spring quarter at UCLA, where every single one of those athletic teams had a 3.0 better GPA, which is huge for the UC and the chancellors. We're talking a lot of crap about them going to the Big Ten earlier this year, last quarter part in the Pac-12. UCLA athletic teams were never better in the classroom. So here we are with what they're trying to do. The Bruins are under a new leadership, a current middle leadership with interim chancellor Darnell Hunt. We're waiting for Julio Frank to take over, the former big-time leader at University of Miami. And then now he's going to come to UCLA to take over. And a lot we're calling for, Martin's head. This is a guy who was the guy who made the big move, right? Him combined with Gene Block, all of a sudden, they made shocking headlines. UCLA, USC, going to the Big Ten. That was that was probably, you could argue, bigger than Texas and Oklahoma going to SEC, because UCLA and USC opened the door probably for the rest of these schools to just break up the conference. And UCLA was one of the biggest, because if USC moves, we're talking crap about USC for days. But UCLA went, and the UCLA AD was one of the biggest proponents and backers of it, right? As we saw, this was a world that, are you reactionary or are you proactive? And that's a quote I've heard him say multiple times in various interviews. And now when we saw how this Chip Kelly saga played out, how the Bruins were waiting to figure out, hey, are we going to get rid of Chip Kelly? The fan base was disillusioned. They were very frustrated with Chip Kelly, I think, really early on, right? There are some who have hated Chip Kelly for a long, long time. I don't think we should have been hating Chip Kelly as early, but as we could see with the recruiting numbers, they went way down. And then the tarps got thrown on. And in the midst of it, Martin came in with the COVID era. So how do you bring fans back in the LA area who is already a little bit slow to get back into, attending things, a little bit slow to get back to regular life than some parts of the country, but slowly got there. And then there's a lot of apathy towards Chip Kelly when it came to football games, and then terrible times when they were good in 2022, 11 a.m., 11:30, practically breakfast in the Rose Bowl against some poor opponents, with Michigan canceling that series in that year, which would have been so much fun. And then we watched them just play ugly in the 23 season. It's like, hey, I think it's time to get rid of Chip Kelly. And then he just left. And after all that, instead of firing him, after seeing how everybody was going to go, Dante Moore left, everything was going awry. And UCLA sat back on its heels, couldn't muster up whether it was choosing what to do or enough money to fire Chip Kelly, whichever it was necessarily as the focal point. They sat on their heels and they sat with DeShaun Foster. Now, I think DeShaun Foster has gone well beyond expectations, especially what they were with the Bruins starting 1-5. Everybody outside of UCLA has hated the move and laughed at the move when DeShaun Foster stumbled through his Big Ten speech. But if there's ever a moment to make this move, it is now. If you're thinking of UCLA, when the Bruins football team is riding high, you can say, all right, the UCLA women's soccer hire and Marguerite Hozasa has won a national championship in her first year, and in her first year in the Big Ten competed for a regular season title and won the school's first ever Big Ten conference title. So that's called the first ever Big Ten title in UCLA history. He's made quite a few coaching changes, including naming a new football coach as a former UCLA player, current Hall of Famer DeShaun Foster. And he's made some big moves. Now, I am stunned that move happened in this transitionary period. I didn't think UCLA would be willing to make a move like this. I thought with the way the new administration could come in, a new chancellor, that would mean, I'm not sure if that would mean something new, but you let him get a new chance, fresh eyes to look in on it, right? It's like when the AD takes over, it's like, all right, any coach who has a terrible season could be a sitting duck, a lame duck coach coming up to a season. And, the one guy that's pretty much ahead of the AD would be the chancellor who makes a lot of decisions. And with that shift happening, it's like, hey, there's a part of the fan base, maybe more than I'm realizing, that did not like Martin and think he is incapable of doing a good job. Then there's the other part where it's like, are we going to forgive him for leaving the Pac-12, being a part of that movement to leave? Or it's like, hey, was he coming into a broken place with, hey, a huge deficit, a crumbling athletic world, an ever-changing collegiate athletic landscape with all of these things going on, and made some pretty bold moves as young AD? Or, which one is it? And he's earned himself what could be very well a decade at UCLA. All right. This is a guy that still isn't even in his 50s yet. All right. A youngster for an athletic director compared to all the old people, as you could say, the old fogies going around leading these athletic departments. This is someone pretty young in a move that is going to define UCLA's beginning and then growth into the Big Ten, right? Because if the DeShaun Foster hire works, then he's going to be looked as a genius. And if he wants to stay at UCLA, he can do so for as long as he wants. If the DeShaun Foster hire fails, then that is going to be the first and loudest and biggest, boldest point UCLA fans will point to. And if UCLA sinks to the bottom of the Big Ten, or you can see how teams fade towards the end of the seasons in many of these sports where, yeah, the opponents might be lesser in some, but just travel, and then it takes a hit towards grade point average. The costs are too great. Those are two things that are going to get pointed to as his big move to the Big Ten. We slowly see how it all goes, right? But now every team has moved into a different conference, so it's not going to just be looked at exactly at him, even though he was a big driving factor to that. So those are important things UCLA is trying to decide. I didn't think it would happen this early, quite frankly. I did not. There have been some athletic achievements. There have been some downfalls that I've been disappointed with and disagreed with why UCLA didn't make the move, specifically to Chip Kelly. I don't necessarily think I like to see the Pac-12 crumble, but being proactive instead of reactive, I can totally understand that mindset. And I'm not sure it's UCLA's to blame for the rest of the crumbling conference realignment when it already had begun to start, even decades prior with different conference realignments. So for now, UCLA's extended their AD to a current contract through 2029. I just wonder when the chancellor gets in and the interim chancellor, nothing wrong with Hunt, nothing wrong with the move, what that chancellor is going to think about that. Are they in cahoots? I just wonder how that all goes together with a move like this being made right now with interim power in place. It's a unique thing to discuss. Unique, interesting. Is it the right move? Only time will tell. And we'll tell you more about what I think these keys to the game are for UCLA versus Washington and what could define a potential bowl berth for DeShaun Foster in year one at the helm of the UCLA football program. Are you ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook? Because right now, new customers can bet $5. If you win, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's right, the FanDuel Sportsbook app has everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and more all in one place. So check out if you got the hunch in the middle of the game, you've got live play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. If you're a new customer, you win your first $5 bet, get $150 in bonus bets. Hey, if you're choosing to bet this UCLA-Washington game, I've been using the bet against UCLA rule the last few weeks, where mentally I am betting against UCLA, and all of a sudden they've come out winning according to the money line. And the Bruins have actually covered these last few weeks, all while winning because they've been huge underdogs, and they'll probably be underdogs again heading into Washington and maybe the next couple of weeks. FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch on a bet. Also, make every moment more with FanDuel, a official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Cruising on here, second segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. They're taking on the Washington Huskies. Two teams starving for a bowl berth in very different directions, right? UCLA, I think maybe over the last few years has had a greater balance. Washington, I would think, is probably seeing a lot more highs, but maybe a little bit more lows than UCLA in recent years. However, the Huskies are coming off a coaching change because Kalen DeBoer obviously at Alabama. You bring in Jed Fish, and we've seen how much that's meant to Arizona, underachieving. And then here he is really seeing different things happening at Washington after a super senior, very veteran-laden team taking the Huskies to the national championship game earlier in 2024, just falling short after a magical season with Michael Penix Jr. and company. But Washington needs this win to get to a bowl, right? They're at 5 wins. They got Oregon in a couple weeks on the road in Eugene, current #1 unbeaten Ducks, while the Bruins sit here needing 2 of their next 3 to get to those 6 wins. You win the next 3 in a row, and then all of a sudden you've got a team that's won 6 in a row. I think it's a lot to ask UCLA to win 6 in a row at the end of the year after a 1-5 start. Now, the opponents in the scheduling has worked its way to this, where UCLA played their 4, maybe 5 toughest games in a row, where 4 ranked opponents in a row, 2 at home, 2 on the road. And then right when you're beat up, you're playing a surging Minnesota team at the wrong time, blow it just before the confidence is about to burst in the right direction. And it has, with wins at Rutgers, wins at Nebraska, and now a strong win at home against Iowa. Can the Bruins turn it into a week's worth of a win against Washington in UCLA's final true road game of the year, which could be the 6th straight sellout we've seen the Bruins play in on a road game, 2nd straight Friday night? I think this game is going to be defined about how UCLA can utilize their newfound physicality, both offensively and defensively. The Bruins have proven themselves to be a top 10 rushing defense, surprisingly. I did not think that would be the case this year with this team. And yes, you can battle, and all right, which of these teams can they run? But after you stuff Iowa, all right, you stuff Iowa, who's supposed to be built on being able to run the football, be more physical than the opposition. The Bruins were able to out-muscle the Hawkeyes. It's going to be a different game against Washington. Can UCLA run on this Washington team? Because I remember, I think, some of the better things that Washington struggled with was handling a USC running back in a more recent win against USC. The Washington numbers against the run this year, they are the 88th best rushing defense. They allow 4.58 yards per carry, over the season, Washington has allowed 162 yards per game on the ground. If UCLA is to win this game, they're not going to trust Ethan Garbers to win it. Not after a game where he turned it over 3 times all by himself, all right? In a place where he's actually going back to his original school, right? He initially signed out of high school going to Washington, but is finishing off his UCLA career as a Bruin, a senior leader, having to go through the waiting period, losing the starting job, winning it back, once again winning back UCLA fans. This is a chance to cement his UCLA legacy and turn the DeShaun Foster era, the Foss era, into something special. It's going to be more of a, hey, don't turn it over. Let's run the ball. It'll be cold. Saturday, I was looking at the weather. It's supposed to be rainy, but Friday night, it seems like just more chilly weather. Obviously, potential for anything to change, but more cool weather, which generally means ground and pound. If this were Saturday where it looks like 75% rain, that could be something. But right now, Friday night looks a little clearer, I think, on the weather, just a lot chillier and a bit more frostbite. The first true night game UCLA will have played on the road this year. Something to take to note, because they've played afternoon games. The daylight's been there, a lot of rowdy crowds, but sleepy, tired crowds who are eating breakfast for tailgate food, which should not be eaten for any tailgate food unless you're there tailgating from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which obviously is not the case, especially not at the Rose Bowl. So I wonder what a Friday night crowd is. Not the same as a Saturday crowd where they've been tailgating almost all day and they're probably really buzzed or something crazy and they're going to it's a little different on a Friday night. Maybe students don't have classes on Fridays, not really sure how they get it done at UW. UCLA needs to ground and pound, take the crowd out of it, because they have faced some decently, not the best rushing attacks this year, right? Coming up, UCLA's got USC, who gives up 133 yards on the ground. They faced Hawaii, who gives up 136 yards on the ground. And UCLA's already faced the likes of LSU, who's supposed to have terrible numbers against the run, 150, and they just completely manhandled on the Bruins on the offensive line. Rutgers is supposed to be a team that is just as bad against the run as LSU, and Rutgers gives up 151 yards. So this newfound running attack has to, I think in this game, the Bruins have to bank on it because they have gotten past the 100-yard mark and stayed past it the last couple of games, dominating with 200 yards on the ground against Iowa. UCLA needs a spectacular performance from its offensive line, and whether it's TJ Harden, maybe it's Keegan Jones-Berger, or another spectacular 50-yard run from Ethan Garbers, as long as he holds on to the football, any one of those 4 ball carriers in any given moment has to have either a good moment combined with consistent attacks and success in the run. UCLA has to rush for close to 125 to 150 to win this game. I'm getting ultra aggressive for a UCLA team that has not proven that they can do this over the long run. They've done it the last couple of weeks. They faced a lot less physical opponents. They've been more imposing, have the Bruins last few weeks. And you would think after as time goes on, the running back head coach, the running back offensive coordinator, all those together, you would think a team would learn how to run the football. And they have the last few weeks. Now they're going to have to sling it a couple times, and Garbers has to make the throws and not just throw it straight into the Husky defensive player's hands. But UCLA needs to get to 125 to 150 yards on the ground. Now for Washington, they're good offensively because they got Will Rogers. They also have Damon Williams Jr., who is expected to get more snaps than I think one would probably think going into a later stage of the season with a super senior quarterback like Will Rogers, who, mind you, is one of the better passers in the country when it comes to individual passing statistics here. So let's take a look about this UCLA team. They're facing off against Will Rogers, who has thrown for 2,300 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His yards overall this season closer to the top 30 in the country. However, amongst those top 30 passers in the country, Will Rogers is actually got one of the fewest touchdown passes when it comes to total touchdown passes in the country. For the top 30 quarterbacks who have thrown for a lot of yards, he hasn't thrown for a lot of touchdown passes. Washington has found ways to shoot themselves in the foot. You have Williams Jr., who's taken a couple of those touchdown passes in different moments, but Rogers has also protected the football, completes 71% of his throws, but has only thrown 5 picks. So for the top 30 to 40 quarterbacks in passing statistics, hasn't thrown for a lot of touchdowns. He's thrown it around the gridiron for a lot of yards. He just hasn't put it in the end zone, but he also hasn't forced a lot of turnovers. And the Bruins were able to take advantage of a few Brendan Sullivan mistakes. This game, I'm not sure Rodgers is going to make those mistakes, at least not in the same number. So if Garbers turns it over 3 times, you can't expect the defense to force 3 turnovers, let alone 2 in this game. 1, I would be very happy with the defense. 1, I would be very happy. But what the Bruins have struggled with has been getting off the field on 3rd down and generating pressure from anybody beyond the linebackers, from the secondary when the Bruins bring blitz and blitz packages. And if they do it well-timed, then they're good. But they have to make their plays, make their tackles. Missed tackles will not work in this game. You can't miss your assignments because the Bruins have proven the secondary cannot hold up against the poorest pass rush on 3rd and 10. If you're not forcing the quarterback to get the ball out in a hurry and you're giving him a few seconds to throw way too long, he's going to get first down after first down after first down. Now, the Bruins made Raiola look like a true freshman, but at times they made Kaliak Manis for Rutgers look like a superstar. Okay? Can the Bruins get off the field? And the reason why I think UCLA could absolutely lose this game is whether it's a combination of Will Rogers, Williams Jr., whoever it might be, Washington might see, hey, we can throw the ball. If the offensive line holds up just a bit in this game, which doesn't mean they have to do a lot against UCLA's defensive line. If you look at the long season haul about this, then that's why UCLA is in danger of losing this game, and maybe by a couple of scores, not by a wide margin, but enough for Washington to be comfortably ahead in a cooler, loud environment where they see this circle on the calendar as their chance to stamp their bowl eligibility ticket. Where if the Bruins lose this, doesn't mean they're out by any stretch of the imagination, but it just really hampers those chances. So what does UCLA need to do? They have to keep Rogers under 275 yards passing. Now, UCLA can still win it if he gets around 300, a little bit above, but to solidify the win, you have to make sure he gets under 275 yards passing, throws a pick, and that means in my mind, the defense has played well. He's just throwing from behind because he's not a guy that's proven consistently to go 4 touchdowns, a pick, 425. But if he's going for 325, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, I think Washington would win that game. I absolutely do. Absolutely. All right. So we'll talk more about it. Prediction time. Talk about that next here on Locked On UCLA. Go check out Game Time's picks because, hey, Game Time picks makes it easier to get tickets to check out your favorite team wherever it might be, or maybe it's theater, maybe it's concert events. Check out Game Time because it filters out the fluff on thousands of seats and thousands of events around Southern California and more. Game Time picks, the curation makes it easier to save up more up front on these big time events. And with the seat views, you can get panoramic viewing from your seat so you know you're not stuck behind a pole, stuck behind some weird aisle. Maybe you don't like the aisle seat. And you're like, dude, this is the aisle where everybody's going to get up and you can't see the game. Well, you can check that out on Game Time beforehand. So you're like, I like this seat, but I'm going to get a better seat where nobody's going to stand in front of me the whole game getting up back and forth. All right, check that out with Game Time so you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDCOLLEGE, Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Cruising on here in the Locked On UCLA podcast, final segment, prediction time. What do I think is going to happen? And I believe I said the score on Locked On Big Ten Squad. I was getting into it with Roman a little bit, having a bit of fun, poking Spencer as well, trying to get a little couple ribbing in because he said, hey, UCLA, best case scenario, 2-10, 3-9. And we might disagree that if you're a little off on your prediction, but when you say best case scenario, when you say best case scenario, you don't get to get that extra win and act like, okay, I go to bet. No, you can't do that. When you go best case scenario, that's the best you think they're going to do. And you're like, dang, I'm really wrong. So it's going to be a little off. But when you say they can't do better than this, that's your mistake. So your mistake, Spencer. Here are UCLA's, and they can maybe get that 5th win and potentially get to a bowl berth. For now, here we're going to settle with our prediction time. So against Roman, I think on Locked On Big Ten Squad, I think I said Washington 24-21. If you're wondering why, I am still picking against the Bruins. One, they're going to be underdogs, and they've been underdogs in like every game since the Hawaii game. I'm pretty sure they've been underdogs in just about every game. And now here they are against Washington, a true road game. It's their senior night. It's a blackout. They're expecting a loud, obnoxious, super packed crowd to cheer on their Huskies. And if it's not, then all of that just favors the Bruins, who are ready and excited and primed for another upset, another shocking of the Big Ten, another Midwest saying, hey, what about those Bruins out west? Yeah, that's what I would hope the Big Ten continues to say. Wait a minute, UCLA, with the win against Washington, has all but secured a chance to get to a bowl, which could just add up if UCLA could chomp up those next 2 victories against their bitter rivals, USC, and a Fresno State team who UCLA owes a beatdown to, and a victory to end that losing streak to the Bulldogs. What do the Bruins need to do? I told you, run the ball and don't let Will Rogers or whoever's playing quarterback at Washington in certain snaps, certain plays, eat them alive. All right, this is a game where the Bruins have to get to the passer and say, we can run the ball now. We're not going to get stopped. Those are the 2 things that can prove to me UCLA is much better, way more improved than they were in week 3 or week 4 against LSU, when a similar team that couldn't really run the ball like LSU, who has numbers to this point in the season of being unable to stop the run, and the Bruins, 1, couldn't run, 2, couldn't stop the pass, and LSU won that game going away, where the Bruins were in competition but faded down the stretch on the road. And to be a better team in conference play with a bowl berth on the line, you have to prove that you've gotten much better. You don't make stupid mistakes. You can do things better to attack a team's weakness while you slow down the opposition strikes. And that's where I hesitate to think UCLA can win this game in Washington. They're going to score a few points because the Bruins, I don't think, can stop Washington's passing attack again and again consistently for 4 quarters. Because when a team has dropped back to pass a lot, it's been a few weeks since we've seen the team truly do that, then that's where I think I'm going to hesitate. Like, I don't know. But again, I have invoked the bet against UCLA rule. And as I've said, you bet against UCLA and they'll win. And since I've started the bet against UCLA rule, Bruins fans, UCLA's 3-0 against Rutgers, Nebraska, and Iowa. So we're going to keep it going, and we're hoping the bet against UCLA rule works. Now, what am I going to do against the USC Trojans? That'll be ugly. It'll be hard to say and predict them to do anything good. For now, I say Washington, I think 24, UCLA 21 was what my initial prediction was. It'll be a close one, absolute barn burner, but the Bruins can certainly win this game. Absolutely. Iowa went and dominated Washington. Rutgers knocked off UCLA. In a lot of these common games the Bruins and Huskies share, the Bruins mostly played the opponents that they share, mutual opponents, a lot better, which there is a lot of hope for UCLA to win this game. It's just a little different beast with senior day. Some of these players playing their final home games, always the most emotional nights of their career. I'm just a little hesitant that the Bruins can stop a Husky team that says, hey, this is our regular season finale of sorts where they're playing for a bowl, and the Bruins still have extra shots at it. So those are my thoughts. I'll still be on after to react and say, hey, the Bruins are on fire. I'm excited. Hopefully the energy's still there. I still believe, of course, the Bruins can absolutely win this game. But a bet against UCLA rule has been working, and we're going to stick with it, okay? And after that, react emotionally with me in the Locked On UCLA podcast. We'll talk more about it. And hey, stay tuned for more content. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.